realized I didn't have my camera on because I'm an idiot. But that aside, I came across this bit of information last night, and it's that the D.O.D. has authorized or made a law. I don't know if it's a law, but they've given themselves self-authorization along with the administration to take lethal force using our military against our civilians. This seems to be kind of a wide catch-all authorization for themselves, including and up to like the unmanned stuff, their Reaper drones, and these horrifying weapons of war that we love to deploy against people all over the world to, in my opinion, illegally kill them from thousands of miles away, is now apparently authorized to be used against the United States citizens. This is, obviously highly concerning. We've been heading in a very dark direction in this nation where our federal government is not only not accountable, it is openly corrupt, and it keeps getting caught using the tools that we have allowed it to acquire. So surveillance tools, mainly the surveillance tools. And now they've turned it from the outside inward, something that I've been saying is going to happen for 10 years now, ever since the Patriot Act is more than 10 years old, but it took me a few years after the Patriot Act to really understand what that was really about, which had nothing to do with securing Americans. It had to do with expanding our deep state and our government's ability to survey us. So the same government that has no problem weaponizing its intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies and its court systems to imprison, bankrupt, and destroy the lives of the people it considers rivals. So basically the conservative movement, Christians. It has no problem using these weapons against its citizens, has now also authorized itself to use its weapons of war against its citizens. And do any of us believe that with this authorization that they won't use it? If they weren't willing to use it, why would they give it to themselves? So we've got a unaccountable, corrupt, tyrannical, unelected class of our government that has now just given itself the power to murder us in the streets if we become an issue for them. So I'm just going to jump into the video. Like I said, this is new information to me. I just came across it last night. I think the first video I watched was Guns and Gadgets, I want to say was the channel. And this is the Armed Scholar. I hope he doesn't mind me using his content to react to. But I just found his video very concise, informative, and I just want to kind of piggyback off of it. So I'm currently at a stop, sitting in my truck, waiting to get loaded with Wendy's dipping sauces. So let's talk about our government's plan to weaponize, further weaponize our agencies against us.
So the Biden and Harris administration just authorized for the military to use lethal force against civilians if there is unrest. To be talking about a new order that came out, a new DOD directive, which was issued by the Biden and Harris administration, essentially authorizing for law enforcement agencies to request assistance from DOD and military, units. And also through this DOD directive, there is an authorization for those agencies, for those units to use lethal force against civilians that maybe are engaging in what is conceived to be civil unrest or other types of activity, to where then the military units would be.
Now, remember, they classified anybody on the Capitol grounds as domestic terrorists. You know, they're trying to push that whole narrative that even if you were on the grass, you didn't do anything, you held your sign, you're on the grass, you yelled stuff, or maybe you didn't, but whatever, you were just there. They're classifying those people as domestic threats. So their definition of what a domestic threat is very loose.
Be called in. What we're going to be talking about is DoD Directive 5240.01, and it's titled as the DoD Intelligence and Intelligence-Related Activities and Defense Intelligence Component Assistance to law enforcement agencies and other civil authorities. This was a directive issued on September 27th and has now made its rounds, and everybody's talking about what implications does this have, especially leading into a very uncertain time right now in our nation. As many of you are aware, we are now heading into an election. In just a few weeks now, we're going to have probably a very controversial election. And so it's going to be very interesting, and a lot of people have uncertainties about maybe how some of the things will play out going into the next few months. And so this is also concerning because then you have this directive coming out and in some ways authorizing for military units to engage in lethal force if they're called in to maybe stop some sort of civil unrest and maybe use lethal force against civilians. So in the general application, it talks about this issuance applies to OSD, the military departments, the Office of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Joint Chiefs Staff, the combatant commands, the Office of Inspector General of the Department of Defense, the DoD field activities, and all other organizational entities within the DoD. So essentially that is just talking about all of the different aspects and all the different components of the DoD that this would apply to. It states that this issuance, this directive, does not apply to activities conducted by the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. It does not apply to things like humanitarian assistance, disaster readiness, response, and recovery. So there are some carve-outs. It talks about how this doesn't apply to certain units in certain circumstances like humanitarian assistance. But then it goes on to say that it is for the support of civil authorities or civilian law enforcement agencies conducted in accordance with the DoD directive, including when such support is provided by the Defense Intelligence Components units, personnel, or assets. So like I said, that is kind of the general principles aspect of the directive, saying what units this applies to, in what circumstances this could apply to, and maybe who is required to.
So I'm not a military guy, never served. I don't have that many friends that have. I have a few, but so I don't, all the different levels of the military and the components of the military, I'm not the guy that's going to be able to go into any kind of depth or pretend that he understands what those things are. So if you know, if you're watching this and you know, then good for you. I don't know.
Operate under this directive. And now we're going to move to the 3.2 section, which talks about the permissible assistance. And I explained this kind of as the general what assistance can be provided under this directive. And it states that in accordance with the section 2.6 of the Executive Order 12333, as amended, the following defense intelligence component intelligence assistance to any federal department or agency, including the
following defense intelligence component intelligence assistance to any federal department or agency, including federal law enforcement. So that sounds like the ATF or FBI or one of these federal law enforcement agencies, who we all know are above board. You know, they're not compromised or corrupt at all, and they have no, they're not players in the political spectrum at all. But apparently, the military can back these forces up. So, I mean, instantly, what I see in my head is the military rolling down neighborhoods in conservative areas with the FBI door kicking. I don't know. Like, it's disheartening.
The federal law enforcement agency or to a state or local law enforcement agency.
Right there. So, or a state law enforcement agency when lives are in danger or authorized. How fucking vague is that? When lives are in danger, your life's in danger 24/7. You wake up in the morning, and you go about your day, you're surrounded by things that could kill you. You drive to work, you could die. So that is the most just vague statement. Lives are in danger. Trust me, trust and believe that when they employ these forces, which they will, they're going to use this. They did not go out of their way to create this authorization without the intent of using it. They have something planned. And then they gave themselves the most vague window that they could fit the authorization in, so that basically they can authorize it whenever, however. Trust me, they will. Let's get on.
When lives are in danger, are authorized, one, cooperating with the appropriate law enforcement agencies to protect the IC's employees, information, property, and facilities of any element, unless otherwise precluded by the law or the executive order, participating in law enforcement activities to investigate or prevent clandestine intelligence activities, and three, providing specialized equipment, technical knowledge, or assistance of expert personnel for use by any federal department or agency, or when lives are in danger, to support state or local law enforcement agencies who are requesting it. So again, this is talking about the type of authorization that is granted, what type of assistance can be provided, the DOD giving, certain units, the military giving certain units to potentially state or local law enforcement who are needing assistance for certain activities. This can be provided to them upon request. And then there seems to be kind of this catch-all provision in 3.2 in the, I believe, subsection 4, when it states that when lives are in danger, rendering any other lawful assistance to law enforcement agencies or other civil authorities provided such assistance is consistent with some of the other directives. So as we talked about, there's this kind of the general principle of who and what units this applies to, what DoD components this applies to, what type of assistance and authorities can be given to local and state law enforcement who are requesting them. And then when you look at the directive under 3.3, it talks about the levels of authority. And this is the section that has everybody very upset. It talks about what authority the DoD has, what authority they can give to the state and law enforcement, what type of lethal force they can engage in, and then also the types of approvals they would need to get to engage in that conduct. It states that
how can anybody believe that your government is still your buddy, your friend? Who are these people that still think that the government has your best interest in mind? These people hate you. They see you as just a number that is either a plus or a negative in the tax revenue column, and depending on if you're a plus or a negative is how they're going to pull your string to get you to comply. So these people are demonic psychopaths.
Subject to paragraph 3.1, defense intelligence components may provide personnel to assist a federal department or agency, including a federal law enforcement agency or a state or local law enforcement agency, when lives are in danger, in response to a request for such assistance in accordance with the following approval authorities. It states that A, the Secretary of Defense approval, so really that's the main one where you would need to get the Secretary of Defense to approve it. And then it goes on to say in this same section, when the Secretary of Defense, in what situations.
So an unelected official can approve lethal force against citizens.
The Secretary of Defense controls and has to give the authorization. And the main one we need to focus on is that, subsection A, which states that provisions of personnel to support response efforts for civilian disturbances, which may also require presidential authorization. So when it comes to potential.
Do any of us actually believe that BLM or the Antifa groups will suffer any of this? I mean, they're the ones out that actually burn cities down, attack places, create their own little autonomous government zones that instantly need you to feed them, house them, give them supplies, and those people. Does anybody believe that the Biden administration and the current bureaucracy created this this authorization for that, which I still don't approve of? I mean, I don't want to see Reaper drones bombing U.S. citizens. And or is it more likely that there is a nefarious plot underfoot and they know that it's not going to be received well, and that there could be unrest amongst the law-abiding, tax-paying base? I think it's more likely that that would be the reason that this is even on the table, considering they have never once taken a concerted effort, let alone condemned or stopped these looting and burning of our cities by these leftist groups. It's only the conservative grandma meemaws at the Capitol who waved their flag because they were disenfranchised through a massive vote theft that our government feels they need to take lethal force against and imprison and round up and track down years and years and years after the fact, for daring to just stand outside a government building, let alone go inside. They first went after everybody that went inside, and now they're rounding up people that were even just in the vicinity. Except for Ray Epps, the Fed Epps.
Potential civil disturbances, civil unrest, in which the D.O.D is being requested by.
And can we also note that it is repeatedly, like with the Gretchen Whitmer, Fed Epps and all, it's repeatedly shown that the feds instigate the unrest. They will go in, find a few dissidents or unhappy people, and those people are just unhappy. They might be, posting even crazy things online. And so the feds find out who these people are and then approach them with assets, either agents or assets, and walk them into criminal activity that they would have never taken on their own. And so these are the same. So now they're not accountable for that either. They're allowed to trick and coerce distraught citizens into criminal behavior on one hand, and then now they've also given themselves the authority to call in the military and kill the people that they riled up in the first place and got to commit the crime. So they go in, they create a crime where there was no crime before and would not have been without their presence, and then they get to kill you now for the crime that they riled you up to commit. Interesting.
By state or local law enforcement or military units are being requested. There you would get authorization from the Secretary of Defense. That is the main overarching authority that you would have to get the authorization, potentially also the president to approve that. But that is authorizing military to be mobilized in those civil disturbances, in that civil unrest situation. And then it talks about subsections.
The civil unrest, undoubtedly, like I just said, created by them.
C, and this is really the lethal force section that everyone's concerned about. It states that C, assistance in responding with assets.
Hold on. Assistance in responding with assets with potential for lethality or any situation in which it is reasonably foreseeable that providing the requested assistance may involve the use of force that is likely to result in lethal force, including death or serious injury. It also includes all support to civilian law enforcement officials in situations where a confrontation between civilian law enforcement and civilian individuals or groups is reasonably anticipated. So there has to be no evidence for it, such use of force must be in accordance with, the permission they gave themselves, potentially as further restricted based on the specifics of the requested support. So there has to be no actual physical resistance. There could just be the reasonable, which what does reasonable mean? Reasonable anticipation of it now authorizes the military to be there to use lethal force. Very interesting. And are these what's it say, civilian with civilian individuals or groups? Are those civilian groups the militia groups that are actually like protected under the Constitution? Is that the groups they're talking about, or is it just like distraught patriots voicing their concerns?
With potential for lethality or any situation in which it is reasonably foreseeable that providing the requested assistance may involve the use of force that is likely to result in lethal force, including death or serious bodily injury. It also includes all support to civilian law enforcement officials in situations where a confrontation between civilian law enforcement and civilian individuals or groups is reasonably anticipated. So this is talking about the general authorization having to go through the Secretary of Defense, but it's saying that that authorization has to go through that office when you're dealing with these specific situations, when there is lethal force that is going to be engaged in by the DoD unit against civilians because of general unrest or some other things going on. And here it's almost authorizing or recognizing that lethal force is being used by those agencies. And
Can we just also address the fact that the only reason that there would be general unrest in America would be because of, you know, like people being fed up with the corruption or feeling that there is no other outlet anymore. Like they've shut down every other outlet to express discontent with the system that is fucking you, and so that would be the only reason that there would be general unrest. I mean, how bad does it have to get? How helpless do you have to feel to actually like take drastic actions against the government? And for me, it seems like people would have to feel like there is no other option. Like everything else has been taken off the table, for that to even happen. So it's like they're acknowledging they're spending all this effort to make sure that the grift doesn't stop, but not spending any effort to like quell the unrest with a non-lethal way, as in like, you know, actually do things for the citizenry that put you in office. The only reason that you exist, the only reason that you are in office is to serve us. But yet, we're the last ones ever served. Everybody is in line before us for the things that our government can do. Every foreign nation, every foreign group, the illegals that have poured into our country, all these people are in line before the American citizen, and obviously there is growing unrest centered around that as more and more Americans are waking up to the fact that we're getting a raw deal, and that we've kind of walked ourselves into like being slaves almost to the system, where we're just expected to shut the fuck up, keep working, pay your taxes, moron, and vote the correct way. When we come up with new lunatic ideas to like sow division amongst you, we need you to fully buy into those new forms of division, race and sex, and you know, every other division that they sow. And never question the narrative. Questioning is a radical thing, and if you don't like any of this, and you feel like you are being like robbed of your birthright, that makes you a dissident now. And if we kind of sense that, you know, you're going to start getting vocal about it, maybe taking to the streets about this massive theft of your birthright, we're just going to kill you. Like, that's how this is go. This is how this relationship is now. We do whatever we want to you as the government, and you just accept it. You could be upset about it, but we need you to like be upset quietly while still working while still paying your taxes. And if we could if we could finally get one of these world wars to launch off, we want you to strap your boots on, white men, because you're good for nothing else. The one thing that you're good for as a white man is to go, we'll ship you across seas, to the deserts, to the frozen tundras of Russia, and just die en masse for us. Just die en masse so that we don't have to deal with you. We could stop trying to do this whole little song and dance replacement thing, and we could just murder you all off into foreign lands, as to protect our freedoms. We're delivering democracy, we're protecting freedom, all while back here at home we're completely raping the system and doing away with every single God-given right. And if you have any problem with this, that makes you a radical, and that makes you an extremist, and more importantly, it makes you a threat to the system, and any threats to the system must be killed. So.
And then there's subsection D, which talks about provision or use of DoD unmanned systems. Essentially, that's talking about even unmanned systems being authorized, drones being authorized in these situations, getting approval for those, from the Secretary of Defense.
Can you imagine our government truly, actually using drone warfare on us? I mean, I could see it happening, but just imagine what that actually looks like. Them drone striking cafes, because a political figure that has, garnered attention and rallied support around him is having a drink in the cafe, or drone striking a truck with 4 MAGA supporters in it that's heading down the highway.
When you're dealing with these civil unrest situations. Now, even more concerning, which I see in this, which I'm not trying to glaze over the fact that it is very concerning that lethal force is authorized potentially in this directive, but also when you look at section 3.5, it talks about exigent circumstances. So really what that's talking about is if there is a situation where there is imminent fear of death or bodily injury, or severe risk potentially, in a situation in which it's this assistance is being requested, they can mobilize and move and do this without the required Secretary of Defense approval.
Bam, there it is. So they also have the authority. They don't actually need approval. What he's going to go on to say is they have 72 hours. So if there's an imminent threat, meaning it could pop off any second. So there's an imminent threat or fear of death or bodily harm or any of that, without the Secretary of Defense, the President, whatever, they could mobilize the military against civilians. Think about that. My experience with law enforcement these are the scariest human beings on the planet. These are the human beings that if you scratch your butt crack while they're talking to you, they will, their hand immediately goes to their gun. These people live in a state of fear. They are fearful betas, in my opinion. Not every law enforcement is like that, but it's a culture that's been bred into them, and it attracts a certain kind of human, and unfortunately it attracts a very shitty kind of human. To the law enforcement that's good out there, this doesn't apply to you. But to the tyrant law enforcement that I see all over social media, they walk up, it's a traffic stop, they walk up to your car with their hand on their gun. To me, putting your hand on your gun is an implied a death threat. You are threatening to pull a firearm on me and murder me over a traffic stop. If you raise your voice to a cop, you tell them to fuck off, all within your, you're not aggressing towards them. You're not moving towards them. You're standing where you're at, and you talk rudely to him, which I don't advise, but let's say you do it, and then his hand goes to his gun. That is an implied death threat. You put your hand on your gun when a cop's acting crazy and see how that goes. So we're authorizing the scariest agencies to decide if or not they feel threatened. Nice.
Approval, but they could only operate potentially for 72 hours, and then they would need to submit the approval required. But even that is concerning for 3 days. You could have a military unit or a DOD, agency or whatever operate for 72 hours without the required approvals in these types of civil unrest situations. So I wanted to bring this to your guys' attention because I know a lot of people are talking about it, circulating online. I wanted to give my additional take on this because of some of the other.
So in an extreme example, in 72 hours, they could mobilize the entirety of the military, take over entire cities or regions if they wanted to. They could authorize drone strikes, missile strikes, shoot on command, shoot on sight, whatever orders, and just do whatever they want. That's what it sounds like. And that could last for up to 72 hours. That doesn't seem like a problem.
Provisions that aren't being covered in the directive. I think really if this was ever to be used, we are in a very bad position in our nation where maybe they would be using this directive, and I think that would signal some larger issues going on.
I think that if they were to ever use this, where they actually take military assets and murder civilians, and I don't care if they're on the right or the left, they're American citizens. I'm not talking about drug cartel, Mexican drug cartels. I'm not talking about illegal gangs, South American gangs. I'm talking about American citizens. If they ever authorize, well, they've already authorized it, but if they ever actually implement it and use it and kill American civilians using the military, I think that's the end of the American experiment. Let me get those words out. From there, it's gloves off. It's just gloves off. You don't come back from that. That's a federal government that has abdicated its right to lead. As soon as you start killing the people who you are supposed to be serving, you're no longer in service to them. And that kind of rescinds in my opinion, that kind of rescinds any right or authority you had to lead in the first place. And at that point, it's gloves off. I believe it's civil war. I think that there would be states that, at that point, I think that you would have quite a few states that would move towards succession, and then there would obviously be civilian militias that move at that point. You can't have a federal government. You can't have a government that is elected to serve the interest of its people using its advanced military on its dissatisfied populations. It's just not acceptable. It's just not. Unfortunately, I think that it's going to happen because they don't give themselves powers that they don't intend to use. So, all right. So I think that's pretty much it. I'm just gonna say this is Armed Scholar. Let's see if I can. This is the Armed Scholar. I would say go over to his channel if you like this and give him a sub. I like how he's very unemotional in his presentation. He just kind of gives it to you straight. I'm looking at this. He is an attorney. Anthony Miranda. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to murder your name here. But yep, I would go to his channel, see what else he's got up. I'm sure he'll be covering this subject. I just found this, like I said, I found it last night, and I wouldn't say I was shocked because I've been expecting something similar to this. But it's one thing to expect it and then for it to actually happen, to know that my government's capable of it. What you trying to do? You try and get under baby's? Okay, get up under baby. There you go. She likes being under the babies. Yeah, so it's one thing to know that your government's capable of it and that they're moving in this direction, and then for them to actually do it. And then coming up on a very contentious election cycle where I don't believe that everything is above board and that there is tens of millions of people now who are more awake to the reality of what we're dealing with instead of like it was in 2020 and 2016 where the masses, the information didn't flow as freely like it does now with Twitter. So there was a lot more just people asleep to the corruption and the double dealing and the dirtiness of our government, where I believe there's a lot less of that now, and people are kind of just reaching the end of the rope with it. So with that, I'm going to end the video. If you liked this, I would appreciate it if you would give me, the whole like and subscribe and comment below. All that cheesy, lame shit that everybody says on their videos. So I just said it, so that means that now I'm officially a YouTuber, and because I'm officially a YouTuber, that makes me so awesome and cool, or something. I don't know. If you liked it, please consider giving me a subscribe. I actually enjoy making these videos. So peace, and whatever you do, don't be a threat to your government now in any way, shape, or form, or you might get murdered. So that would be bad.